Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Whisper your city or country in the comments, then settle in. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's drift back to ancient Greece, where dust, laurel, and legends filled the air. And imagine what it would feel like if you competed in the ancient Olympic Games. The first sign is a voice on the wind, a herald on a low hill, copper badge catching the sun, calling out in a careful cadence that the sacred truce has begun. Echecheria, hands lower from spear shafts, arguments cool like embers in ash. The announcement passes from village to village, from island harbours to mountain passes, a gentle thread pulled through the Greek world. No city may hinder those travelling to Olympia. No soldier may block the roads to Zeus. You listen, and for a long breath the whole land seems to lean toward the west. You decide to go. You roll your cloak tight and knot it with a cord. Into a small leather bag you place simple things: a round loaf of barley bread, a handful of figs, a wedge of goat cheese wrapped in leaves, a stoppered flask for water. Your oil bottle, a little clay arybbalos, rattles against your strigil. The sandals, thongs you rethread and pull snug. If you are an athlete, you add the most important weight of all: the discipline you've been building morning after morning, the quiet promise you made to your own breath. If you are a pilgrim, a poet, a potter with a cart of bowls and lampstands, you carry the same hope inside, light and steady as a laurel leaf. The road begins with familiar stones, then spills into new dust. Herms, square pillars capped with the bearded head of Hermes, stand at corners and crossroads. You touch the cool stone and murmur a quick request for a safe journey. The air is already warm, the kind of summer heat that presses the hills into a pale, shimmering blue. Cicadas unfurl their chorus from the pines. On ridgebacks the wind tastes of thyme and salt. Fishermen mend nets on shorelines that glitter like hammered bronze. Farmers lift their heads from the vines and call out to ask if you're bound for the games. Yes, you say, and their faces soften, as if you've told them you're going to see an old friend. You travel in the safety the truce provides, and yet you move with care. At river crossings you trade a coin to a ferryman whose boat smells of tar and reeds. On the road you fall in with others: a youth with calloused hands who hopes to enter the boys' stadium, a grey-bearded sculptor whose eyes measure everything, 2 women with baskets of woven garlands for sale at the festival. They speak of roots and fountains, of a good end beyond the olive groves, of a shortcut over a saddleback where stones are loose and goats dart like shadows. In the pauses, the youth admits he has timed his sprint by counting heartbeats. The sculptor smiles and says that victory is a measurement the gods make, not men. At small sanctuaries the road seems to narrow into a hush. You stop and sprinkle a pinch of barley at an altar blackened with old smoke. A priest with wine-purple fingers from crushing grapes paints a line on your wrist with ash and tells you the name of the local wind. Children run alongside for a while, racing your shadow. Sometimes you walk beneath planes and poplars that surrender patches of shade. Sometimes you pass long, bright stretches where heat floats from the ground like breath from a sleeping animal. When the day climbs high, you wet your mouth and let the warm water sit there before swallowing, the way shepherds do. Time slows to the pace of your feet. At dusk you reach a pandokeion, a traveller's inn with a low courtyard and a fig tree leaning over the well. The keeper sets a clay lamp on the threshold. Inside, voices drift from rough tables, sailors comparing currents, a flute player tuning and retuning one weary note, a woman telling a story about an athlete who refused a bribe and found a purse of silver under his doorstep the next morning. You eat simple food: barley porridge with herbs, olives glossy with oil, and a piece of roasted fish that tastes of smoke and salt. If you are with companions, you speak softly about the things ahead: the judges from Elis, the oath to Zeus Horkios, the sudden wideness of the stadium. If you are alone, you listen to the other travellers' wishes until they feel like your own. Night is a separate country. You lay your head on rolled cloak or straw mattress, and look toward the slice of stars framed by the doorway. Somewhere beyond that small window is the west, the valley of the Alpheos River, the old sacred grove called the Altis, the temple that holds a statue so large men say its gaze is calm enough to quiet storms. An older man near you snores gently. A moth troubles the lamp and then settles. The flute player finds at last a second note and then, mercifully, stops. You sleep. In the morning, the inn's courtyard smells of warm straw and crushed fig leaves. The innkeeper's daughter coils rope. A stable boy brushes dust from the flank of a pack mule. You wash your face at the well and oil your limbs against the day. The road grows busier as you draw nearer to Elis, the city whose people serve as the game's guardians. Ruts deepen, wheel hubs creak. A cart laden with amphorae catches up to you. The driver laughs and offers a ride, but the mule's pace is no better than your own, and you prefer the steadiness of your steps. At a fork, a pillar bears a small inscription. To Olympia, this way. The letters look like they were cut with patience. You pass orchards where children gather windfall apples, their hands sticky and bright. Shepherds lift a hand in greeting, then return to watching the rhythm of sheep moving like low clouds across the slopes. As you near Elis, you notice the fields, flat and generous, and the way the riverlight sits on everything like a second liquid sky. Elis is where the last month of training happens for athletes who mean to compete. Even if you arrive early, you can watch them, boys practicing starts on packed earth, men lifting sacks of sand to build a back that will carry a shield through the hoplite dromos. A trainer, reed in hand, calls meter like a poet. Again, again. Short steps to long. Listen to your feet. If you are one of them, you present yourself at the proper house for registration. There is a small formality to it, but the weight of tradition makes it feel larger. Names are given, ages are checked. Those who would compete swear that they have trained for 10 months, and that the last 30 days will be spent under the judge's watch. The Hellenodikai are not stern so much as exact. Their eyes were sharpened long before you appeared. They measure without measuring, stance, breath, the easy truth of the body that has kept its promises. You leave Elis on a morning drawn thin by mist. The road follows the Alpheos, whose broad back glides east to west like a patient animal. Herons stand at the edge of reed beds like pale parentheses. When the sun climbs, the mist lifts, and the river turns to polished metal, then to a sequence of green mirrors. Travellers bunch and thin, then bunch again, keeping the friendlier sort of pace. A poet recites a few lines about Pelops and his chariot, and for a while the story walks with you. A potter's cart loses a wheel pin. Half a dozen strangers bend to help, and in minutes the wheel is righted and the potter is laughing, palm pressed over his heart. The truce does something to people's faces, smoothing worry, lifting the corners of mouths, the way fresh oil brings grain back to dry wood. The first glimpse of Olympia is almost shy. The road crests a low hill, and the valley opens gently, as if someone parted a curtain. You see trees first, plane, poplar, and the particular green of wild olive. Among them, shapes gather, stowers and treasuries, small temples whose pediments catch the light. A long, low bank of earth that you know is the side of the stadium. Smoke rises in thin columns from cooking fires and altars, blue and upright in the still air. Somewhere a hammer rings iron on iron where a smith is fitting a pin to a chariot wheel. A boy runs barefoot across hard ground and does not seem to touch it. You cross a small stream, the Cladios, on a plank footbridge polished by thousands of souls. Your steps slow without your telling them to. There are merchant stalls at the approaches, terracotta figurines, wreaths of myrtle, mulled wine ladled steaming into cups, little bronze tripods that chime when touched. A woman plats your hair with a single sprig of olive and does not accept payment, only a wish whispered for luck. The crowd is many cities at once. Doric vowels and Ionic music, the broad accents of islanders, the quick cadences of mountain towns. You hear rivalries too, but they run under the surface like springs, present, yes, but cooled by custom. At the boundary of the sacred precinct, sandals slow, then stop. The Altis is not large, but it feels deep. A grove and a cluster of holy buildings that make a kind of stone forest within the living one. You do not enter at once. You stand a little aside, watching. Priests pass with measured steps, their hair bound with fillies of wool. A herald lifts a staff and in a set of long syllables calls for attention. The sound carries and then flakes into echoes among the leaves. A line of athletes, oiled and dusted, goes by, their faces steady and distant in the particular way of people listening to their hearts. You breathe in the air of the place. It smells of olive and clay, of smoke and river, of sun-warmed resin, and the faintest edge of metal from distant chariot work. If you are to compete, you will swear your oath to Zeus Horkios in the council house, your right hand over a boar's-cut hide, a reminder that truth is a living thing and must be honoured. If you are here to watch, you will still feel your chest lift at that moment, as if your own breath has been included in the oath by accident and must keep it. You find a place to stay, some piece of ground with other travellers under a line of trees, or a corner of a portico where the stone keeps night cool even in late afternoon. A stranger lends you a folded cloak to soften the ground beneath your hip. You share your figs and a story from 2 towns back. The sun lowers. A hush collects like dew. Far off, a flute begins, its notes careful as steps on a new stair. It does not call you to sleep. It invites you to carry your wakefulness lightly, like a lantern held high enough to see the next few feet and no more. When darkness settles fully, you tilt your head, and the stars slide into their old reliable arrangements. Someone near you names a few, the swan, the eagle, the harp. Someone else, drowsy, argues that the victor's wreath should be up there too, an invisible circle that only those who have seen Olympia can pick out. Laughter rustles like cloth. Lamps wink out one by one. The river keeps speaking in its one voice, patient and low. You close your eyes, and the last thing you notice is the way the olive leaves click against one another when the lightest breeze finds them, like quiet applause already beginning for things that have not yet happened. You arrive with the morning mist still clinging to the riverbanks, and the line has already formed. Athletes, trainers, and fathers, each waiting to present themselves to the men from Elis who keep the games in order. They stand beneath a shaded portico, the Hellanodikai, judges in simple cloaks, faces composed, voices quiet and exact. Their work is not showy, it is sifting and weighing what is allowed, who is ready, whose promise has substance. Beyond them the sanctuary opens like a calm room, the grove's leaves whispering, the faint clang of a smith's hammer, the aroma of warm oil and dust. You feel the weight of simple facts on your shoulders. To step onto the sand you must be freeborn, not enslaved, and Greek, part of the Hellenic world by city, tongue and custom. You must not carry the stain of blood guilt. You must come without infamous crimes trailing your name like a torn cloak. Men remember stories. A hopeful runner turned away because a murder purification had not been completed. A boxer refused because his city could not vouch for his standing. In later years, men from Rome will stand in this line too, fitting themselves into Greek rules like a hand into a well-used glove. But for now, the sense is older and simpler. To compete here is to belong to a web of cities that can argue, trade, even fight. But pause for this. When your turn comes, you give your name, your father's name, and your city. A scribe murmurs them back and presses a stylus into warm wax, then reads them aloud again to be sure the letters match the breath. If your dialect marks you as island-born or inland, no one minds. The judges listen for truth, not accent. A man 2 places ahead produces witnesses to attest to his citizenship. Another shows letters from his city's magistrates. You can feel the air of the place hardening around each oath and document, the way the morning cool firms into heat. Age matters. The boys stand together, faces smooth, eyes bright, wrists a little knobby, waiting to be measured not by a rod but by the gaze of men who have seen 1,000 shoulders. The boys' events are their own world. Shorter limbs, quick starts, whistles of effort rising higher in the throat. The men gather apart, older bodies carrying their history plainly, the silver scar under a boxer's eye, the thickened knuckles of a wrestler, the runner's ankles like cord. Some festivals elsewhere will sort out a third group of beardless youths, but here at Olympia the line usually breaks into boys and men, and the judges decide where the borderline is by looking at bone and bearing. If a boy tries to pass as a man to gain glory, or a man to pass as a boy to gain advantage, the judges see through it. They always have. There are exclusions that are both soft and firm. Married women do not enter the men's stadium. This is the rule, old and widely told. Yet even rules have edges, and people speak, in low, respectful tones, of the priestess of Demeter who has a seat of honour, and of rare occasions when duty threads a path through custom. Meanwhile, there is a path of glory for girls too, though at another time. The Heraia, foot races for maidens in honour of Hera, their tunics short to the knee, hair loose like river water. No one confuses the two festivals. They are different songs with different refrains, sung to different gods. If you've come here meaning to compete, you have already promised a long promise. 10 months of training is the expectation, not a phrase but a calendar of mornings, a rope of days knotted with discipline. You have learned the simple liturgy of preparation. Oil the skin, dust for grip, scrape clean with the strigil, a light meal, clean water, rest. The last 30 days must happen under watch in Elis, where the judges and trainers can see the truth of your preparation. Some athletes arrive early, hungry to be seen doing exactly what they claim to have done. Others arrive just in time, their faces showing the quiet of men who have learned not to spend their strength on the air. Before any name becomes more than a mark on wax, you and all who intend to compete will be led to the council house, the Bouleuterion. The air inside is close and solemn. On a stone table rests the hide of a boar, dark, thick, silent as a night without moon. You place your hand where so many have placed theirs and swear by Zeus Horkios, Zeus of Oaths, that you will honour the rules, submit to the judges, and seek victory by skill and strength, not by trick or coin. Fathers swear for sons, trainers for pupils, the vow binding a small circle that widens and tightens with each word. No one speaks loudly here. The oaths have their own volume. Beyond the oaths there are the quiet conditions everyone knows but few recite. That the body must be unencumbered, naked as custom requires, so that strength is honest and nothing is hidden, that trainers and companions will keep their distance at the crucial moments, that a false start on the line will draw more than a frown. Attendants with slender rods wait not to humiliate, but to enforce the thin, bright wire of fairness that runs through everything. 2 pages of a rule book could be spoken in an hour, but these rules live in gesture and habit. The judge's raised hand, the herald's call, the way an athlete who has yielded in boxing extends his open palm and is met with one in return. You notice too that it is not only athletes who must qualify. Heralds and trumpeters undergo trials of their own to earn the right to be the game's voice and breath. On a bare patch near the stoa they compete. The herald's diction tested across the stretch of the crowd, the trumpeter's call judged on clarity and endurance. The chosen men will announce names, declare results, and guide the tide of thousands with sound alone. It is a kind of entry, another gate through which the festival must pass. Paper is scarce and inscriptions are costly, but memory here is long and exact. The men of Elis keep lists, and poets keep stories, and cities keep statues. For the moment, the list you care about is small: your name, your fathers, your city. The scribe dries the wax and copies it later, careful as a man stepping stones across a fast river. Some names will go further, to the lips of singers, to the chisels of sculptors, to the corners of marketplaces where children will shout them while racing. Many will vanish into the quiet. Vanishing is not failure here. To have stood in this line and sworn is already to be counted among those who placed themselves in the scale. From time to time the line halts, and the judges confer. A rumour shivers up and down the portico that a man was seen accepting coin from a rival city, that another has hired a secret coach in violation of custom, that someone's father has offered 4 fine horses to a judge's cousin. Rumours pass through hands like hot stones and cool quickly under the eyes of the Hellenodikai. If bribery is proved, fines will be levied. With those fines, tradition says, bronze statues of Zeus may be cast and set by the stadium entrance, so that every athlete who walks in will see the god and read the warning line cut into his pedestal. The sanctuary does not enjoy shaming anyone. It prefers prevention, but it knows people and prepares accordingly. Some men are turned away and bear it well. A shoulder shrugs, a head bows. A trainer's palm rests on a pupil's spine with a pressure that says, next time. Others argue and are silenced not by threat but by the simple gravity of the place, the sense that for the length of these days order belongs to the games and not to loudness. A boy who had hoped to wrestle with men is redirected to his proper matches. He swallows his pride and accepts the change because he has learned more than throws. When the formalities end, a small soft happiness spreads through you, like the warmth after a plunge. You are entered. The words feel both light and heavy. Light, because they are only a few syllables. Heavy, because of everything they carry. The days you woke in the dark. The runs you finished when your breath felt like rope. The meals you refused because you could not tell if you were eating from hunger or fear. Across the portico, an older athlete catches your eye and nods, a recognition that does not need speech. He too once stood where you stand now. He too once heard a judge say his name and city aloud, in the flat, formal tone that makes things real. You step away from the portico and into the day, which has grown brighter while you were under the shade. You pass a row of stalls where a woman sells thin wreaths of myrtle, and a man offers sandals with newly cut thongs. A trainer tightens a boy's headband. A potter balances 6 cups on one hand to show a child a trick. The world is the same, and not the same. You have not run a single step yet, not lifted a single opponent, not thrown or leapt or driven, and already the games have begun for you, not in the stadium, but here, in the place where belonging is named and sworn. You touch the small arebalos at your belt and feel the clay still warm from your hand. The grove breathes. Far off, a trumpeter tests a note, and the sound holds steady, clear as a line drawn in the sand. At first light the camp stirs like a shallow tide. A mule shakes its harness, a pot lid taps. Somewhere a flute tests 3 notes, then holds one until it is thin and steady as a thread. You pull on your sandals and step into air that still remembers the night. Across the beaten ground, men are already rubbing oil into shoulders and thighs, working it in with the slow, circular pressure that wakes the muscle without startling it. The oil is simple, olive, sometimes scented faintly with bay or rosemary if someone has been generous, and it has a way of making the skin feel like it belongs to the sun. Training begins before the heat climbs the walls. Runners claim the long strip of earth first. A judge has inspected the stone start line, the balbis, its grooves cut for toes, its edge straight as a promise. You practice starts in quiet strings of 2 and 3, fold at the waist, load the feet, find the breath, and burst. The first steps are short and staccato, like flint taps. Then the stride opens and you feel the ground pass under you in clean slices. A trainer, Paidotribes, walks the line, not shouting but adjusting, a hand to a shoulder, a finger tracing where the knee should rise, a murmured again. Sprinters work in crisp packets. Distance men take the curve of the valley, measuring the sun along their backs, counting not by numbers but by landmarks. a particular olive stump, a dip where the earth holds last winter's memory of rain. When they finish, they do not fall to the ground. They walk, then stand, eyes unfocused, hands on hips, breathing like bellows, because this is how lungs learn not to panic. Near the peristyle of the palaestra, wrestlers open the scama, the soft, dug earth that keeps falls from breaking bones. They scrape it flat with boards, scatter a little water to keep dust low, and step in until the soles have a good bite. The first movements are low and small, grip fighting, head position, the feel of another person's balance under your hands. A good wrestler sees lines through bodies the way a stonemason sees grain in rock. You drill trips, hip turns, foot sweeps, the sudden drop to a knee that becomes a lever. Coaches say little and touch a lot, setting an elbow here, a heel there, showing how the spine stays long even when the position is crooked. Falls are counted clean when a back or both shoulders kiss the earth. You learn to lose a fall without losing the match, as a correction, not a wound. Boxers work in a space of their own, the air around them humming faintly from the pendulum swing of korikoi. Heavy leather bags stuffed with meal and sand. They wrap their hands in soft practice thongs that stop at the wrist and leave the fingers free. The rhythms are long and quiet. Tap, tap, turn, step, slip, guard. The occasional thump when someone forgets to exhale. There is no round bell here, no corner with a stool. There is the coach's gaze and your own judgment of when to stop before your hands turn to wood. Sometimes a pair moves to touch sparring, just the suggestion of strikes, an exercise in restraint that makes the real thing cleaner. When a blow lands hard by accident, the receiver raises an open hand and the other answers with the same. This exchange says we are practicing for victory, not for harm. Pancratius drift between the two worlds, hands and feet both speaking. Their training looks like water poured into a new jar each minute, a kick that becomes a clinch that becomes a throw that becomes a choke. Release the instant the partner taps or lifts a single finger, the small ancient sign for enough. The boundaries are simple, no biting, no gouging. Within those lines, the conversation of bone and leverage is frank. The better you are, the quieter it becomes because you have less to prove and more to feel. On the far side of the yard, the implements of the five-fold athlete wait in a wooden rack. Halters, stone or bronze hand weights with smooth grips, discs cut like moons from metal, and javelins with a coiled leather ankyle tied near the centre of balance. Pentathletes move like cats that have learned to count. For the long jump, they cradle halters, swing them forward, then back, then forward again with a small hop that carries the feet into the sand. A flute often sets the rhythm. Leap on the second beat. Release the weights just as the heels seek the pit. The discus asks for a different patience. Turn, loose shoulder, open hand, and the plate sails with a low hum that seems to bend the light. Javelin throws end in a quick flick as the ankyle unwinds, spinning the shaft to steady its flight. Then, just when the lungs have had enough of grace, wrestling returns to close the circle. Between efforts, men step to the conisterion, the dust room, or simply dip fingers into a bowl of fine sand and pat it over the oiled skin so hands will hold. Dust is not dirt here. It is grip, memory, the chalk line of a day's work written on shoulders and thighs. The mixture of sweat, oil and dust, gloios, will later be scraped away with a curve of bronze called the strigil, and, if collected, used in little ways people swear by. Rubbed on a sore, kept as a token from a favourite athlete, sold by the gym's keeper for those who believe another man's effort can be medicine. Food arrives in ordinary portions, timed to the hours. Morning might be a heel of barley bread softened in water or wine, and a handful of figs, sometimes a spoonful of honey if the day asks for speed. At midday, olives, cheese of goat or sheep, maybe lentils dressed with vinegar and herbs, and onions that bite clean and wake the mouth. Fish appears when the river has been generous, grilled quickly over a little charcoal. Meat is rarer, though some coaches swear by it, and a few athletes from cities with their own customs eat more of it as the festival nears. Water is constant, wine is cut with water as a matter of good sense, and there is kykeon, a barley drink thinned for thirst and thickened for hunger, sometimes with mint or pennyroyal stirred in to cool the belly. No one counts weight, they count mornings. The taper, the slow drawing down of volume as the contests approach, happens more by feel than by rule. What looks like simplicity is planned. The day bends around the heat, work comes early and late, the white hours of noon are for shade, mending sandals, rubbing a knee with oil warmed in the hand, telling a story that has travelled from a city you will probably never see. Someone always knows a trick for blisters, a fig leaf under the strap, the ash of last night's fire mixed with oil, a knot retied just so. Someone else always knows how to quiet a cramp, a pinch of salt on the tongue, a deep breath with the head turned to the left, a walk to the river to cool the feet to the ankles and no higher. Remedies travel faster than people, and most of them work because belief and habit make good partners. There is a place for bodies to calm, the baths, not grand halls but basins and troughs, and, if fortune smiles, a room where water can be poured warm. You rinse the dust in thin sheets that carry the day away in brown veils. Before the wash, the ellipts, anointer and masseur, works on you with deliberate hands, kneading along the grain of muscle, then across it, pressing a thumb into the notch just inside the hip bone where a runner's tension hides, or into the thick of the shoulder where a boxer stores his worry. He knows the difference between a sore that will sing itself away and one that will crawl inward unless it's chased. If you are young, he tells you to sleep. If you are older, he tells you to sleep and then repeats himself, because older men are proud and need reminding. Camp life has its choreography. Tents or pallets gather under trees, cloaks spread to make shade. A rope goes up for drying tunics washed in the evening. Stalls at the edge of the training ground sell what everyone suddenly needs. Extra thong for sandal repair, a cheap strigil that will bend the first time it hits a stubborn patch of mud, a better one that will last, a tiny bottle for oil, a leather strap already tied into a perfect ankyle loop. Children appear and vanish, invent games that imitate the grown men's motions, a wobbly discus made from a lid, a javelin that is only a straight stick and a thrown laugh. Rivals share water without counting. Friends save silence for one another when the next day's draw weighs heavy. The judges drift through like weather, never in your way, always noticed. Their presence is a soft border. Men stand up straighter. Exercises become cleaner. Corner cutting is set aside not out of fear but because everyone remembers the oath. They will observe your last 30 days as carefully as a farmer watches a sky that promises rain. Too much work, too close to the day and your legs turn to rope. Too little, and your courage gets fat and slow. The best coaches build ladders with missing rungs, effort and rest alternating so that when you climb to the top, you still have breath to look around. There are small tests you give yourself. Runners count how many strides it takes to cross the shadow of a certain tree at a certain time. If the number is lower than last week, the heart lifts a notch. Wrestlers measure the print their heels carve in the scammer when resisting a throw. A shorter crescent means hips held lower, centre more stubborn. Boxers press a thumb into their own forearm to feel how fast the blood returns. Too fast means tired. Too slow means something else they cannot name but don't like. Pancratiasts listen to their sleep. If dreams are of tangled fights, the body is practicing without permission, and the day should be lighter. Evenings have their own practices. Some men lie on their backs and breathe with a small pebble on the belly, making it rise and fall evenly until the mind quiets. Others walk the edge of the grove, counting 3 steps per breath, then 4, then back to 3. Training discipline where no one can see it. A few recite lines, poems about horses or heroes, not because poetry wins contests, but because the mouth-shaping old words makes the hands gentle and the face open. The gods like faces like that. You learn the small economies that protect you. Don't enter the scammer when you are angry. Your spine will forget its length. Don't train hungry enough to dream of bread. The jaw clenches and the shoulders follow. Don't chase another man's pace unless the coach says so. Your feet have their own meter and will trip if forced into a stranger's song. Don't boast. Boasting teaches the tongue bad habits that the limbs copy later. Once, a rain comes out of a clear afternoon, the kind that begins as dots in the dust and becomes a soft curtain before anyone can say, "Cover the oil jars." The scammer turns to chocolate. Runners take the road. Wrestlers stand under a porch and practice hand fighting so slow it looks like a dance. A disc sails and shears a slice from the rain like cloth. Laughter bubbles, because no one can see the point in resisting water from the sky. When it passes, the world smells like leaf and stone and something clean you cannot name. Men step back onto the earth with bare souls and feel it in a new way, soft as bread, springing back underfoot. Tapering begins almost without consent. Coaches reduce numbers. The heavy korikoi hangs still for long minutes between short flurries. The scammer shows fewer broad smears and more precise heel marks. The Balbi hosts more starts than sprints. You wake one morning and realise you're not tired in the old way, the tired that feels like weight, but in a new way, like a bow strung and set on a table, humming to itself in silence. Food tastes different. Sleep arrives faster. The oil sits on your skin like a promise rather than a shield. Not every body carries the same ritual, but certain gestures are everywhere. A hand runs along the edge of a calf to check the spring. Fingers drum the breastbone twice before a start. A thumb traces the old scar at the corner of a mouth, as if to remind it that it has closed and healed before. Men from distant cities trade these small superstitions as if they were coins. A few keep them, most let them pass, but the exchange itself sweetens the air. When the last light slips through the trees, the camp settles. A man somewhere tells the story of a jumper whose shadow outran him. Someone else swears he saw a discus catch the wind and rise, a little, before dropping like a well-trained bird. A trainer sits apart with a wax tablet marking the schedule for the next dawn, with the carefulness of a man carving a name into stone. You scrape off the day's mixture, oil, dust, effort, drawing the strigil in smooth arcs that click softly at the rim of the bowl. What falls away is not wasted. It is proof, the thin, dark harvest of a promise kept. You rinse, swallow cool water, and stretch until the breath finds its slowest, deepest sighs. Then you lay down, the ground steadier under you than any bed, and your last waking thought is strangely simple. Feet, breath, hands, eyes, tools made ordinary by use, waiting for the morning to ask again. At the edge of the grove, the air changes first. It grows cooler, resin sweet, a hush laid over birdsong as if the leaves themselves are listening. You stop where others stop, at the limit between ordinary ground and the sacred precinct, and wash your hands from a clay jug whose lip is worn soft by many mouths. The water is cool from the well. A boy passes with a basket of barley, and you take a pinch and let it fall between your fingers, a simple cleansing that blurs dust into the earth. Somewhere a small bell taps twice. The day is beginning in the Altes. You walk beneath trees that have seen more vows than storms. The trunks are pale where the sun has licked them clean. High up, the light stitches the canopies into a trembling cloth. Ahead rise buildings half hidden by green. Low stowers, treasuries bright with carved stories along their pediments, and the great house of the god whose name you do not speak here except in the old, careful way. The smell of olive oil and roasted barley mingles with a thinner scent, metallic and faint. The distant breath of bronze being worked. Your feet slow without being told. People step aside for each other with that particular courtesy reserved for sanctuaries. No jostling, no hard laughter, voices trimmed down to fit the place. The first temple you draw near is older than the rest, stones thick and patient, columns standing like worn teeth in a wise mouth. Its tiles are sun-baked and simple. A priest's assistant sweeps the threshold with a broom of reeds, the bristles whisper. You do not go in yet. Instead, you watch a small procession approach. Men in clean tunics carrying trays of cakes shaped like knots, a pair of flute players walking in step, and behind them a seer with a sprig of laurel bound to his staff. The flutes tread a narrow melody that seems to weave the distance between one altar and the next into a single path. A woman near you bows her head until the procession passes. When she looks up, her eyes are damp, though whether from the smoke or from something older you cannot say. You have come for the contest, but the grove tells you gently that everything here begins in another register. Priests move like steady flames, no suddenness, only continuations. At the Prytaneon, you glimpse the sacred hearth, the fire of Hestia that eats without growing or shrinking, as if its hunger were perfectly matched to the world. Men say the victors will dine here after the games, but for now the room is quiet, holding its warmth like a secret. You pause at the Pelopion, the low fenced mound said to cover the bones of Pelops, the charioteer whose tangled story flows under the festival like a dark spring. A black ram will be offered there later, at dusk. The seer will watch the way the smoke pulls and the way the ash lies, and his reading will fold into the day's other readings, and together they will become the weather of the games. Near midday, a crowd gathers in the bright square above the river's murmur. The altar of Zeus rises not as a carved block, but as a living hill of ash, layer upon layer of burnt thigh bone and sacrificial fat, wetted with water from the Altheios, and plastered into shape by hands that remember how. Priests climb its side by a shallow stair cut into the mound, each step leaving a short scar that the next priest will place his foot into precisely. A hecatomb has been declared. Oxen stand garlanded, patient, their flanks shivering against flies. The first animal is led forward. The knife is clean and quick, and when the thigh bones burn with glistening fat, the smoke rises in a white column that the sun turns transparent. People lift their faces into it. The smell is holy and human at once. The seer looks at the organs, at colour and sheen, and where the vessels lie, and nods with a gravity that needs no words. The rest becomes meat for the crowd, cut and cooked, shared until the hunger in the place is not for food. After the sacrifice, the air thins again, and you are led with the other competitors to the Bouleuterion. The council house is shadowed and cool, its stones holding last night's breath. On a low table rests the hide of a boar, thick and dark, edges puckered. Men stand in a semicircle, athletes, coaches, fathers. The judges, Helanodikai, wait, not stern but exact, their faces as unreadable as river stones. A herald speaks the formula. One by one, hands touch the hide and oaths rise, that you have trained the 10 months, that you will obey the rules, that you will win, if you win, by strength and skill, and not by trickery, not by coin. You feel the words in your mouth like a draught that both warms and binds. They are old words, they fit. There is a statue near the council house, a Zeus with arm raised, the fingers curled around a thunderbolt you cannot see but can almost hear. He is called the Zeus of Oaths here. People say perjurers dread him more than judges do. It is not that thunder will strike you where you stand. It is that a crooked oath bends everything you touch thereafter. Your feet on the start line, your hand on a shoulder, your breath when it seeks the long, even sighs. You look at his face and find no anger there, only a steadiness that offers no loophole and needs none. You step back into sun, and the bright yard between the sanctuaries looks new, as if the oath has cleaned your eyes. A trumpeter and a herald undergo their own contests on the gravel. The herald's voice tested for clearness across the length of a stoa. The trumpeter's call for steadiness and length. Their victories will be practical. They will command silence and give it back again like a tide. Beyond them, treasuries from many cities stand in a neat row, each a small boast in stone. Shields and helmets hang as dedications, spoils of victories elsewhere, beaten quiet by being turned into offerings. You trace a dent in a bronze rim with your fingertip and feel a faint shiver of the hand that made it long ago. Then you approach the Temple of Zeus. The steps up are shallow, the columns enormous, their flutes running with light. Inside, the gloom has its own architecture, made of sandalwood scent and coolness, and the faint echo of your own footfalls. And there, filling the house as a mountain fills a horizon, the god sits. Gold and ivory catch the stray shafts of light and break them into gentle fire along folds of robe and curve of arm. His skin, smooth as quiet water, has the warm pallor of worked ivory. In one hand he holds a small figure of victory, in the other a staff topped by an eagle. His head is wreathed with olive leaves worked so delicately that when the light moves you half expect them to rustle. The throne is carved and inlaid, a forest of small stories, lions and lilies and heroes painted and bright, but you keep looking back to his face, which is neither smiling nor stern, only very alive in a way that makes breath slow by itself. People do not stay long in front of him. You do not need long. You carry his scale inside you when you leave. Outside again, the world feels lighter. You notice what you missed before, the white pebbles underfoot, the short, precise shadows of doves on the baked ground, the way the river's voice threads through conversations without interrupting them. You pass the Heraion, the old temple that has watched every new stone arrive and has learned to be patient about it. In one corner a long table stands ready. On it, when the contests are finished, a boy whose parents are both alive will set the wreaths cut from the sacred wild olive. The tree itself grows near the temple of Zeus, gnarled, silvery, high with leaves that seem to carry their own light. Men say Heracles brought the first branch here. Whether or not that is true, its shade feels like a promise made to no single person. Late in the day, when the heat slips its hand from your shoulder, a different sort of movement begins. Processions wind toward the altars with measured steps. Libations are poured. Wine dark as sleep, milk white as dawn, water clear as the breath you're finally taking easily. Cakes are crumbled into flames, smoke turns sweet. Names of gods and heroes are spoken. Zeus, Hera, Hermes, the river, Pelops who began and ended strange, nymphs whose names few remember, but whose patience fills the roots of the trees. The priests do not fill the air with doctrine. They tend it, the way you tend a small fire. Add a twig here, open a space there, move a coal when it needs moving. What burns is not only fat and flour and wood. The little selfishnesses shrivel too, the dozen small corners you would otherwise cut, and the flame makes a cleaner space around them. Toward evening you walk the long bank toward the arch that leads into the stadium, the crypt. Its stone is cool to the touch, and your footsteps echo inside the tunnel like a heartbeat heard with your hands over your ears. The far end is a bright coin of the light. You do not pass through today. It is enough to stand in the shade and feel the pull of that opening, the promise of packed sand beyond and voices layered into a soft, expectant sea. On the wall inside the entrance to the stadium stand bronze statues of Zeus, Zanes, set up with fines gathered from men who tried to tilt the scales. Their bases bear short, sharp sentences that turn every entrant into a reader. Reminders that money stains, that hands should be clean, that the crown is light because it is only leaves and heavy because it is everything else. You run your eyes along the letters until they blur and become simply one more thread in the tapestry of warnings that holds the whole place upright. Night is its own ritual. Lamps swing from hooks under the stowers and print small warm circles on the stone. The last smoke from the altar unspools into a fading ribbon, and then is gone, leaving the sky to its own dark blue work. A priest locks a door with a key the size of a child's forearm. The scrape of the bolt is soft, deliberate, final. Somewhere a singer tries a line of an old hymn and abandons it, as if the words belong to morning instead. You walk back through the grove, and the olive leaves knock gently together in the breeze, making the soft, irregular sound that has stood in for applause here for as long as anyone remembers. You think of the boar's hide under your palm, the god's enormous calm gaze, the ash hill, the little pinch of barley falling from your fingers, the small bell at dawn. You think of the tunnel and the bright dot at its end. You lie down on your cloak under a curious star and feel the ground hold you with the same old strength it offers the temples, the altars, the trees. The grove does not sleep, it watches. You close your eyes, your breath enters the rhythm it learned in the council house. Somewhere, quiet has turned page, an oath settles into place inside you and stays. Before the sun has fully climbed the ridge, the stadium is already awake. Dew sits in the shallow cups of the time and glints like scattered silver. Breath hangs briefly in the cooler air. Sandal thongs creak as men test their knots and retie them just a little tighter. The embankments, a long, patient sweep of packed earth, begin to gather people as if the hillside were collecting its own shadow. A child points at the start line and whispers something that sends a row of elders smiling, mouths closed, eyes gone soft with memory. You walk down to the long strip of sand and feel it receive you. It is not loose, rolled and raked at dawn, so that it meets the foot with a firmness that still yields, like a good listener. At the western end, the stone threshold waits. The Balbis, its twin grooves cut straight and near, the edges worn where 1,000 toes have searched for grip. Attendants smooth the surface with broad palm brooms. Another moves along with a shallow basket scattering fresh dust so the first step won't slip. A herald stands in the clear with a staff that gleams at the tip, and near him a trumpeter with a face already composed for long work. When the herald calls for quiet, it comes not all at once, but like a tide finding the same shore from many inlets. Murmurs fold, sandals still, a cup's ring against stone is the last small sound, and then even that stops. Names begin, your name, your father's, your city, offered to the clean morning air, and then to the crowd, which receives them with a lift of breath as if each syllable could be luck. There is a simple order to the motions that follow. Men step forward, oiled but dusted, shimmering and dull at the same time. You place your toes in the grooves and lean into the stone as if it could teach you patience. Hands curl, one ahead, one back, not from rule but from the way balance chooses for you when you're ready to move fast. At your left, a runner touches the rim of the Balbis twice with one fingertip. He will do that every race. And on your right, another lifts his face to the thin slice of blue and blinks once slowly, like a man asking his eyes to remember distance. The attendants stretch a starting cord, thin as a reed and just as springy across the line. You feel it rest against your knuckles, not heavy enough to weigh you down, just present enough to keep a promise honest. Down the course, 2 men hold a second cord beyond the finish, a reminder that the race doesn't end at you but must pass through you. The judges step into their places, their cloaks falling straight. A rod-bearer positions himself where he can see the first 2 steps of every man, not to threaten but to make the truth obvious if it wavers. The trumpeter lifts the instrument. The morning gleam runs along its belly and rests there. The note he gives is not loud so much as exact. It threads the distance to the far bank and ties it to this one. The herald's arm hovers and you feel time tighten, a drawn bowstring you're suddenly aware has been there since the moment you woke. The arm falls, the cord snaps down, the world becomes the width of your chest. The first steps are small, quick, a rattle of drumsticks on a table edge. Your feet bite and release, and then lengthen, as if someone opened a door just in front of you. The sand is louder than you expected, grit hissing under your soles, small clicks where grains strike each other and your own ankles. There is no lane paint to hold you like rails. There is only your sense of straightness, and the soft presence of those at your shoulders. You do not look right or left. Looking wastes the neck and loosens the mouth. The finish sits far and close at once, a bright thought held somewhere behind your eyes. In that short road the whole morning fits, the olive wreaths waiting in cool shade, the oath settling in your ribs, the hill of ash and the quiet statue and the tunnel with its dot of light. Your tongue lies flat and dry, your arms swing as if the hands were pulling new wind toward your chest. The far chord grows from thread to line to a piece of the air. Every nerve begins to chatter that there isn't enough distance left to fix anything. And so you stop fixing, and let the body do what it has been practicing in secret while you slept. When you cross, the second chord snaps down and your motion carries you 3 steps, then 4, then the world widens again and every sound returns all at once, loud as rain on a bronze roof, shouts, the slap of hands, the trumpeter's reply to the first note, your own breath arriving like a friend who ran to catch you. You do not fall, you walk, because walking teaches the heart civility. The rod-bearer's face is unreadable. This is good. A judge points with 2 fingers, first toward the altars, then toward water, and you nod without meaning to. Back at the start, the next names are already being spoken, and you realize with a small wash of relief that you are not thinking, only listening to the tender ache in your calves as if it were a small animal settling into a nest. When the single-length races have unfurled in bright threads across the morning, the double-length takes its turn. The Diaulos is not twice the stadion only in distance, it is double in patience. Now the far end of the track becomes a place with a shape, the turning post, Campta, standing like a slender tree. You set yourself again at the Balbis. The same chord rests against your knuckles, the same breath finds its gate. At the signal, you go, and the first length is a memory that becomes present, sudden, exact, and already sliding under you. At the post, a knot of air gathers where everyone means to put his foot. You see the space come, take it half a heart's width early, lean a little toward the inside and feel the whole long animal of your body bend and unbend around the turn. A man behind you misjudges by a hand's breadth. His heel carves a crescent in the sand, and he corrects with a hiss that might be breath, or might be a quiet word meant for himself alone. The second length tastes different. The sun has moved, the wind has changed sides. Your tongue is salt now, not metal. You measure the distance by the sound of the crowd rather than by your eyes. First loud, then briefly thin at the turn when you hear mostly your own feet, then loud again and swelling as you enter the final stretch, where the earth leans the faintest bit in your favour. Later, when the long race is called, the whole stadium changes its breathing to match. Men step forward who look like thongs pulled snug, nothing loose, nothing wasted. The Dolichos is not counted in laps allowed, but everyone near the track keeps a tally in his fingers, folding one, then another, like a prayer said to the legs. The start is gentle, it has to be. Those who mistake brightness for speed, let the morning pull them forward too much and then begin to leak at the edges. You can see it at the mouth first, how it fumbles for ease and finds none. You fall into a pace that feels like a sentence paired of extras, only necessary words, only necessary steps. The posts become landmarks in a country you know. Here is the place where a breeze comes down the slope and cools the shoulder. Here is the place where the sunlight blazes off a pale stone, and you pretend not to notice it. Here is the slight dip where the sand thickens a finger's width, and you lift your feet a hair higher. Each turn collects small decisions. Pass now or later. Step into the wake of the man before you to borrow a little of the air he has already paid for, or stay wide and keep your rhythm clean. The judge's eyes follow with a steadiness that makes the track feel narrower than it is. Shoving would be a quick solution and a long problem. A water carrier walks the edge with a sponge and a shallow basin for those in real trouble. You look away from him on purpose and let your breath fill the room behind your ribs in 4 quiet beats. In, 4 quiet beats out, then 3 and 3, then 4 again. An abacus you slide with your lungs. Somewhere in the middle everything simplifies. The crowd becomes a woolly edge. The other men become moving shapes with a certain weight. Your own body becomes a soft engine that has decided to keep its questions for another time. You visit the turnpost as if they were old friends and leave without lingering. Then, as if someone had set a lamp in a window, the sense of the finish returns. You do not speed up, you simply stop not speeding up. The track receives the larger steps and does not argue. When you finally cross, the body is surprised to be asked to stop doing a thing it had convinced itself was the same as breathing. You speak to it kindly with your feet, and it agrees to walk. The afternoon builds toward bronze and thunder. The armoured race gathers in a patch of shade where men grease their feet lightly, and then dust them to make the first contact with the sand honest. Shields lean against a low wall, their rims glinting like crescents of sun pulled down to earth. You pick up yours and feel immediately the logic of its straps. The wide paw packs for the forearm, the anti-lab at the rim for the hand. How the weight settles not in the wrist but across the whole arm, as if the shield had always meant to become a part of your gait. A helmet's interior smells of leather and salt and the ghost of someone else's breath. You lower it, and the world narrows to a letterbox of light. Sound changes too, becomes close and barrel deep. The crowd's murmur turning to a far sea, your own breath to a tide inside the mask. At the line, men arrange themselves shoulder by shoulder, an accidental wall. The shield faces do not make a single plane but a rippling one that catches bits of sun and throws them away again. You cannot see all the way to the finish, and that is good. The mind is clumsy when it tries to hold too much distance at once. The signal comes, clean, familiar, and the wall dissolves into a dozen separate lives running the same path. The first steps are strange. The left arm asks what it has done to deserve this weight, and then decides it has always carried it. The helmet adds a soft sway to every stride. You learn to let the eyes ride steady inside it while the head settles into a calmer arc. Dust lifts in a low travelling cloud. The shield's rim clicks against your hip once, then not again because the arm learns quickly. The post comes on not as a shape but as a shift in light. You bank around it, the shield leading like an argument you have chosen to make with your whole side, and when you straighten, the wind finds you through the helmet's small slit and lays a cool finger across your lips. Somewhere a man stumbles, his shield slaps the sand and roars like surf. Hands reach to help, and then withdraw, because the race is a river that cannot stop for one stone without becoming something else. You feel for a slow half-dozen paces the old purpose of the event hum through it, the way it turns speed into steadiness, steadiness into nerve, nerve into the particular courage of carrying a thing that would be easier to drop and refusing the ease. When it ends with the abruptness of a door closed softly. You cross. The second cord lies down. Your calves wobble, not with weakness, but with relief. The helmet comes off and the world expands, a tent wall pulled back to show the whole hill. Someone laughs, and the sound is young. Water touches the tongue and returns the ability to swallow. Men lift shields and lean them carefully out of the way, as if to thank them for their trouble. The sand records everything in a palimpsest of heel crescents, toe digs, sudden flares where speed found a little more speed at the end. Through it all, the judges move like the hands of a very large clock, seen sometimes, felt always. They confer, then lift a hand, then speak to a herald who speaks to the crowd. A false start earlier brought a quick stripe to a thigh and a longer lesson to a mind. A drift too hard into another runner's path earned a firm word and a face that will not forget the shape of that word. Fairness is not a rule book here so much as a shared memory of what it looks like when the gods are pleased. As shadows lengthen, the track cools underfoot. You step away and everything that was shrill becomes gentle. The embankment exhales. People shake out their cloaks. A dog finds a patch of high ground and circles twice before folding into it. The herald reads names again, some with a weight in them that will travel all the way to another city and stand in stone there one day, some that will slide back into the wide, kind anonymity of those who came and did as they had promised themselves. Your own name, when it arrives, does an ordinary, miraculous thing. It reminds you that a mouth you cannot see can shape a sound that belongs to you and send it across a valley in late afternoon light, and you can catch it, and you can put it away somewhere under the ribs where oaths and morning trumpets and the smell of dust live, and keep it for the next time you're asked to place your toes in a pair of grooves and wait for the world to become, again, the width of your chest. The Scammer is a shallow square of soft earth, raked smooth at dawn and ringed by a low hush that crowds learn without being asked. You step into it, and the ground gives just enough to record intentions. Ankles sink a thumb's depth. Heels leave crescents like new moons. A judge traces a line with his sandal to mark the centre. 2 attendants pat water into the dust so it rises only when a foot truly speaks. You and your opponent meet palms first, open hands brushing in a quiet pledge that says, "We will try to win cleanly." Then fingers turn to hooks, and maps are drawn on forearms. Here is the ridge of the ulnar where pressure persuades. Here the notch by the elbow where a grip can live or fail. Foreheads find a measured distance, not quite touching. Your breath settles into the size of the space between you. Wrestling begins before the first pull. It begins in how softly you stand. A good stance is not defiance. It is agreement with the ground. Knees low, hips heavy, spine long as a plumb line. When he reaches for the collarbone, you give him your shoulder instead. When he tests your right leg, you let the left whisper forward, heel barely kissing earth. The first fall is often a single mistake disguised as certainty. Someone believes too strongly in a grip and forgets that balance has 1,000 small exits. A feint to the wrist becomes a snap to the back of the head, becomes a level change, becomes the brief floating of a foot. Your hand finds his triceps and guides it toward emptiness. His shoulders kiss the soil, the judge's palm cuts the air. 1. There is no clock on the Scammer, only the understanding that rhythm wins more than surprise. You circle and let his breathing tell you stories. Fast means hope trying to outrun itself. Slow means caution ripening into boldness. You work the two-handed clasp behind the neck, the arm drag that pulls him past you like a curtain, the hip that rolls like a tide and leaves him skidding harmlessly into dust. Sometimes you lose a fall and it teaches you where you are holding your breath. Sometimes you take a fall and it teaches you how gently victory should land. The third point feels less like a shout and more like a door closing softly. You stand, share a nod that drains whatever heat remains, and step out with hands that still hum with what they learned. A little farther along the stadium's edge, fists begin their separate grammar. Boxers work under a sun that turns every drop of oil into a small star. They wrap their hands with thongs, himantes, soft for practice, stiffer for contest, leather laid flat and snug, ending in tidy knots that the judges check with a quick press. There are no rounds to rescue you and no corner to hide in. Only you, your guard, and the understanding you've built with your feet. The first exchange rarely lands hard. It is a question posed as a jab, answered by a tilt of the head and a resettling of the stance. Elbows stay close, hands a movable wall that opens only in the direction you choose. Your eyes do not chase his fists, they watch his chest and shoulders for the small tells, an exhale that sharpens, a knee that tenses before a body follows. When you throw, the knuckles travel last as if called by name. When you defend, the forearm is a firm bookend and the cheekbone a thing to be protected by geometry, not by courage alone. Time in the ring is weather. A minute of rain, 2 of wind, a clearing you can't waste. The bag work from mornings, tap, turn, plant, returns without being summoned. You circle left, then right, turning his rear hand into a long road he doesn't like to travel. When a blow finally lands clean, the sound is dull and exact, like a hand clapped once in a large room. He lifts a palm in grudging respect. You mirror it. You learn quickly what your face already knew. A nick by the brow stings, blood tastes like old metal, and both are small things compared with breath held steady. There is yielding in boxing, but it is not surrender. It is the moment a man recognizes that the map of his body no longer matches the country of the other's skill. He opens his hand or lowers his head, and the judge steps in, not as a wall, but as a door. The crowd approves quiet endings. They believe in men leaving the sand the way they entered it, upright, still themselves. On a strip of earth between Scammer and Korikoi, the pancration gathers. It is a conversation of limbs where sentences change shape mid-clause. A kick from the outside becomes a clinch. The clinch becomes a trip. The trip becomes a tangle that would look like chaos if not for the small signals that keep it human. The rules are few and bright. No biting, no gouging. Everything else is a study in how to ask the body to do two opposite things at once. Be soft and be heavy, be quick and be patient. You and your opponent touch hands and immediately the space shrinks. He tests range with a low shin. You answer with a step that doesn't retreat so much as redraw the line. When the distance collapses, your forearms meet like friendly beams and your head rests gently against his temple, finding a tiny arch that keeps his weight honest. A knee threatens and is caught by a palm. A hip presents and is shelved for later. The throw, when it comes, is almost offhand. His foot trips on a moment you put under it. His shoulder finds gravity as if it had been looking for an excuse. On the ground, the sand feels different, cooler, grains speaking through skin. Your chest meets his back. Your arms make belts, then tighten, then loosen by a finger's width, because control breathes too. He taps once, a single rap of his hand on your forearm, or lifts a finger where the judge can see it. You let go at the same speed you took hold, no faster. The end is the proof. In these contests, the judges are not hunters, they are gardeners. They keep the space trimmed so excellence can grow straight. They step in when a boundary is crossed and step out when balance is restored. A lash for cruelty, a word for heat, a hand on a shoulder for a man whose pride is quicker than his breath. You feel watched, and oddly, safer for it. Later, while the combat sand is being smoothed with broad wooden boards, the fivefold art unfolds on the far flat. The rack of implements looks like a small museum of circles and lines, halteries, the weighty crescents with polished grips, discs stamped with faint maker's marks, javelins tipped plain and balanced true with ankyle straps coiled neat as sleeping snakes. The order can shift with the judge's wisdom. Today, the short foot race begins the weave. You take your place for the sprint with men whose bodies read like clean sentences. The start is sharp and over quickly, a single brilliant brushstroke on the morning. You don't chase victory here so much as carve a small advantage for later. A good pentathlete knows that winning one thing is less important than never wasting himself in any of them. The pit lies open for the jump, sand-combed flat, its edges squared like a page. A flute player stands nearby, not as an ornament, but as a metronome. You cradle the halters, cool metal, then quickly warm, feel their quiet promise. Swing well and they will lend you distance. Swing poorly and they will underline your mistake. You take the run-up in a long, even sentence. The flute counts it for you in notes. At the board, your feet gather, the weights sweep forward and then back in a small tide, and you leave the earth with your arms writing the last line. Mid-air is a very fast room. You have time to lift your knees and send the halters forward at the peak, so their small pull carries you another handspan before your heels sketch commas into the sand. The measure is taken from the back of those commas, not the front. You accept it the way you accept the truth of your height. Discus is patience wearing a circle. The plate rests at your fingertips, not your palm. You feel its thickness, its bias, the way it wants to leave you cleanly. You take your turns, 1, 2, soft at first, the world a blur that calms as your feet learn the floor again. The release is an uncurling, not a shove. The disc leaves with a low hum, edge slightly nose up, and cuts a path that the sun briefly cooperates with, turning bronze into a thin line of light. lands flat and slides, whispering. Marks are made with sticks. Judges murmur. You do not watch your rivals throw because watching steals from your next moment. The javelin is a different kind of line, long, sprung, asking you to return it to the air it prefers. You thumb the ankyle loop until it lies right, leather against first two fingers, the strap crossing the palm where pull becomes spin. The run is shorter than it wants to be. Greed lengthens it and ruins the rhythm. You bring the spear back until it almost forgets you, then forward in a smooth path that never dips. At the last step, the ankle turns, the hip rolls, the shoulder follows, and the hand flicks as the loop slips free, giving the shaft a true rotation that keeps its nose from wandering. It climbs, not steeply, and settles beyond the last of your practice marks. There is little to say about a good throw, it says itself. Between these efforts you live in small rituals. You return the halters to the rack with a tiny tap of thanks. You brush sand from your calves with the flat of your hand. You sip water and hold it in your mouth a heartbeat before swallowing. You listen for the flute because even when it is not for you, its steady count keeps your own time honest. By late afternoon the day has narrowed to one last test. You step again onto the scammer, this time with the earlier work still threaded through your legs. Pentathlon wrestling isn't a new art. It is the same conversation spoken in a body that has already sprinted, leapt, thrown, and thrown again. The judges know this, and read with kindness in their eyes and exactness in their hands. Falls are still falls, but the paths to them are different. Less force, more line, less collision, more persuasion. You work grips that can serve. You choose throws that make gravity your partner, and when you commit your hips, you do it like a man paying with exact coin, not silver tossed by the fistful. There is no single scoring that everyone recites in the same way. There is a shared sense of completion that arrives when enough parts point to the same name. Sometimes a man's day writes itself clearly, wins in a gather that convinces even his rivals. Sometimes two names rise and the last bout is not merely decisive, it is clarifying, like washing dust from a tablet so the letters show what they meant to say all along. If the wreath comes to you, it feels light in the hand and heavier in the chest. If it goes to another, you understand why without anyone needing to explain. What lingers from the fivefold is not the best mark in sand or the furthest plate that landed on the field. It is the way each part asked you for a different quality, and how those qualities took turns without quarrelling. Feet that could be knives and then anchors, hands that could be hammers and then brushes, breath that could be a drum beat, and then a long, quiet line. You gather your things from the rack, the halters you will not keep, the memory of their swing you will, and step off the field into the gentle noise of people who have watched carefully enough to be tired on your behalf. On your way back, you pass the places where the day began. The scammer is smooth again. The boxing thongs are coiled. The judges confer in low tones that sound more like weather than decisions. The flute player packs his instrument. The reed still faintly damp. Oil shines in shallow bowls like small patient suns. You move through it all with that particular lightness that comes after you have spent yourself in measured pieces and found there is still something left that is quiet and good. A child runs beside you for a few paces, mimicking the discus turn, the javelin pull, and finishes with a triumphant hop into an imaginary pit. You nod, and he grins, and the world agrees to be simple for a little while longer. At dawn, the valley listens for a new kind of thunder. Before the crowds settle on the banks, before the trumpets test the air, the grooms are already awake in a fugitive grey light, rubbing down coats that gleam like poured olive oil. They curry in long circles, brush along the grain, lift each hoof to pick out stones and murmur names into warm ears. The horses flick their skin in shivers that ripple from withers to tail. Breakfast is a mash of barley softened with water, a handful of chopped hay, sometimes a pinch of ground lupin for strength. Leather creaks, bronze rings tap softly. A boy carries a bucket that smells faintly of river mint and sets it just so. A mare lowers her head and drinks until her throat makes that deep, contented sound you can feel in your own chest. Chariots line the edge of the hippodrome like a row of sleeping birds, light and narrow, their curved rails polished smooth by years of hands. The wheels, spoked, nimble, spin once and settle. You walk a palm along the yoke, ash or elm, chosen for flex. The pole runs straight and true. The pin that will anchor the yoke glints with the confident shine of something repeatedly checked. Harness hangs ready. Broad leather collars, cheek pieces for bits that ask the mouth rather than bully it, long reins coiled like tame snakes. The driver's tunic is long, the xystis, gathered high and belted so fabric won't tangle a knee when the vehicle leans. Some wrap reins around the waist for leverage, a dangerous habit learned from men who have wagered everything on control. A short knife rides at the belt because no animal forgives a mistake forever. Through the opening, the track looks like a river of dust with banks of earth rising on both sides. The air smells of sun-warmed sand and horse sweat, and dry sage crushed beneath 100 sandals. The turning posts, slender, implacable, stand at either end like twin promises that the bold will try to shave them too close. Between them, the long straight calls to speed. Around them gathers risk. People will tell you that all races are decided at the posts. That is not quite true. They are decided in the dozens of small decisions a driver makes on the way to the post, and in the one decision he refuses to make at the last breath, to pull the line wide and live, or to cut the curve so fine that victory and wreckage share a single heartbeat. The starting apparatus is an invention that looks almost like a joke until you see the wisdom in its strangeness. The aphesis spreads in a wedge, or like the prow of a ship pointing down the course. Teams draw lots for lanes. Those on the outside stand closer to the start, so each will run the same distance to the first post. A web of gates and cords holds the line. The herald calls silence. The trumpeter gives a note that ties far bank to near. Then the mechanism drops the farthest gates first, then the next, a staggered cascade that sends the teams arrowing toward the middle in a rush that feels, to the clean part of your mind, impossible to survive. The horses canter and then run. The sand rises low and fast, a moving veil. Lap counters stand by the judge's platform, a line of little bronze dolphins and a set of eggs mounted on poles. With each lap another dolphin dips, another egg turns. You learn to watch their quiet ritual the way sailors watch a lighthouse. Peripheral, trustworthy, not to be stared at. For the 4-horse chariot, the count is long. The course unfolds 12 times around the posts, a dance of approach and escape that tests not merely speed but the rarest steadiness. For the 2-horse, fewer. For the bareback riders, a handful, quick and sharp. A small race for colts can light the valley with squeals and astonishment, all gangly limbs and sudden lessons. The bareback riders, the keelers, sit like they were born there, thighs glued to breath and spine, no saddle, no stirrups. A strap around the horse's chest gives a handhold for the last desperate pull at the end. Some make a clean vault to the ground as they cross the line, sliding off with the grace of men stepping from a moving cart. So the horse's momentum carries free and the judge sees clearly who passed first. A rider's heels turn the animal's body with minimal thought. Knees whisper a language older than cities. But it is the chariots that draw the largest breath. When you take the yoke pole in your grip and step up into the low basket, the world narrows to a feel. The tremor of hooves through wood, the weight of reins over your fingers, the small, bitter taste of bronze and dust where the bit sings in a mouth 2 lengths ahead of you. Your team's 4 stand in a row, the pair at the centre in the yoke, the trace horses outside. Each has a job. The inside horse nearest the turning post must be brave and careful. The outside must forgive a longer path and think in arcs. You talk to them with hands, with sound in your throat, with a steadying glance that they somehow understand. If they trust you, they will lend you bravery at the short places where your own courage thins. There is talk of a frightener of horses to Olympia, a presence near the turn, Taraxippos some say, where shadows and echoes unsettle even the most seasoned teams. Grooms make small offerings there, a tuft of mane, a splash of unmixed wine, a whispered request to the god who loves the sea and horses both, that fear will be trimmed to fit the day. Whether or not spirits dwell at the post, accidents do. Nawagiai, the shipwrecks, can happen in a blink. A wheel climbs the rim of a rut, a pole bites, a trace tangles, a team panics, and would and will go skyward together. The sound of it turns bone cold. The snap of yoke, the rush of hooves, a human cry cut short when the ground takes its price. Then, astonishingly often, the wreck eats only itself while the river of other teams parts and flows around. Drivers soaring lines tight, horses flattening their ears and gathering beneath the yoke with the fierce disciplined pride that very good animals possess. Owners stand at the edge with a tension that is both vanity and love. Here, victory belongs to them, not to the man who risks the turn. A noble can become a champion without setting foot on the track. Even a woman, barred from watching in the men's stadium, can own a team and be crowned a victor by name. Her horses and hired driver, writing her glory in dust and noise. Grooms will be the ones hugged in the hot relieved chaos. Drivers will be the ones whose hands shake when the last lap's egg turns. But in the official lists, in the songs, in the treasuries, the owner's city will be named. It is a quirk of these contests that the person farthest from the danger sometimes receives the wreath, and yet the drivers return and risk it again. Ask a quiet one why, and you'll hear something about the way the pole hums under a perfect turn, or how 4 animals can become a single arrow when your hands get the morning exactly right. No owner can own that feeling. When the field thins and the last laps unspool, the hippodrome makes a sound that is not cheering so much as breathing with someone else's lungs. The dolphins complete their dive. The eggs finish their slow rotation. A team edges a length ahead, then 2, then yields half a length at the post because nothing is free. The finish comes like all endings, with a surprise born of inevitability. The line is crossed, the trumpet answers. The world holds still for 3 astonished heartbeats. Then the after sounds, reins slapping necks, a horse blowing sand from its nose in explosive snorts, grooms running with arms high, a wheel still spinning as if the race were a thought it is unwilling to stop thinking. After the thunder fades, rules remain. They are the trellis on which the wild vine grows. You see the judges everywhere now that you know where to look. On platforms, along the lines, walking the edges of sand with a practiced slowness. They are aliens, drawn from the people whose duty is to keep this place clean of what would spoil it. They have trained for months in the quiet art of being exact without being theatrical. Their faces are made of patience. Their hands carry rods, not to humiliate, but to remind, and whips whose crack is a punctuation mark no one wants to hear more than once. Before the first race, before the first oath, they have watched you practice. They have measured boys not with sticks, but with eyes that know the difference between a youth's bone and a man's. They have heard your name, your city, your father's name spoken clearly in the council house, and seen your palm lie down on boar hide while you promised out loud to fight clean, to run fair, to win by skill and not by coin. They remember which cities keep their promises lightly. They carry those memories without letting them tip the scales. Their work is both obvious and invisible. The obvious parts you can list. They set pairs and heats. They call fouls and false starts. They separate men who forget where competition ends and harm begins. They fine those who try to bribe or bully the day into a shape it was not meant to take. They will stand with arms outstretched at the balbus and make even the bravest sprinter wait for stillness. If the cord drops and your foot follows too soon, the sting to the thigh is quick and public. If you drift into a runner's path and accident takes on a too human shape, a hand lifts, a word cuts, and the lesson lasts longer than the mark. In wrestling, they see fingers that look too interested in smaller bones. In boxing, elbows that wander. In pancration, the sudden mean curve of a thumb near an eye. They do not need to shout. A short step into the scammer, a rod held across a boundary like a gate, and the temperature drops back to lawful heat. The hidden work happens in the texture of the day. They study the draw so challengers meet before favourites are exhausted, so the rhythm of the festival holds steady. They watch the weather, how the wind whips dust at the southern end of the course, and decide if a race should wait a little. They test the heisplex, the springing gate at the track start again and again, because a single sticky chord can turn fairness into accident. When trumpeter and herald compete for the right to command your attention, they choose the voice that can calm a crowd as well as raise it. And when the straight path is bent by human wanting, the judges answer with stone. Fines gathered from those who bought what they could not earn fund bronze statues of Zeus, short, powerful, a row of eyes made of metal and memory, set near the entrance to the stadium. People call them Zanes. Their pedestals carry inscriptions whose brevity is a mercy and a blade. You walk past them in the tunnel, and every letter seems taller than it is. They do not threaten, they remind. If you've accepted coin to soften a fist, if you've lied about your age, if your city has stood behind your badness because pride is sometimes loud and foolish, the god will look like you for a long time and not the version you mean to be. Cheating is not always a bag of money sliding under a cloak. Sometimes it is a coach who whispers that a certain herb in a certain wine will give courage in the last lap. It mostly gives stomach aches. Sometimes it's a father who insists a boy belongs among men because he cannot bear to wait another year for a wreath on his doorway. Sometimes it is two rivals from the same city agreeing to go soft on each other, so one can save strength for the final. The judges pull at these threads without tearing the cloth. They listen. They confer in tones that never rise. They decide. When a city refuses to pay a fine, the games remember. When the city returns years later with the money and the apology, the games remember that too. Stone outlasts sulk. Their authority meets your humanity at peculiar angles. A boxer opens his palm. Enough. The judge steps in, and the fight shrinks to the size of a nod. A runner trembles on the line, panic swimming under his skin. The judge lifts a hand and with 2 words, "Breathe now," returns him to himself. A pancratiast hardens and begins to forget the rule against gouging. The lash finds a place on his back where memory lives, and instantly the mind returns. It is strange to be grateful for men who carry rods, and yet you are. They preserve the one thing everyone came for, though no one can name it in a single word. The sense that the day is just, that effort has a clean field to run on, that honour is not a story we tell after the fact, but a way a body moves under the sun while others watch. Stories circulate as they always do. A famous athlete who bribed and was found out. A city that tried to argue a fine down and ended by paying double. An unexpected acquittal that turned a crowd's anger into respect for the care with which the judges had listened. The tales grow like vines around names and years, and you learn to prune them for what nourishes. The lesson is the same in each. What you do here is seen. In the quiet between events, a judge stands alone near the ash altar, rubbing dust between finger and thumb, eyes on the ground as if reading. You realise he's counting the small scuffs where an attendant dragged a rake crooked, making the far half of the track slightly softer. He will mention it, and that small mention will become a line of effort that reaches from a boy with a broom to a chariot's wheel hub to the way the evening wind will lift less grit into a child's eyes. Fairness is not big. It is many small, exact things performed by people who could have been careless and were not. By the time the last measure is taken and the last appeal answered, the judges have become part of the place's weather. You step past the Zanes again, into the tunnel, and touch the cold bronze not as a threat, but as a reminder that clean hands feel better on stone. Outside, a team of horses snorts and tosses as the grooms lead them back to water, their sides banded with salt. A wrestler shares a piece of bread with a boy who will be taller next Olympiad. A driver sits on the grass and stares at his open palms until the trembling stops, then looks up and smiles at nothing at all. The rules, so stern when you list them, have let something soft survive. A belief that excellence can be witnessed without being stolen, that courage can be measured without being dirtied, that men can agree to be bound for a few days each fourth year by something older than pride and kinder than victory. Dawn folds open like a quiet hand and the sanctuary wakes in low murmurs. A boy with parents still living, chosen for his wholeness, walks toward the sacred wild olive near the temple. He carries a small sickle whose blade is not ordinary bronze but gilded, so the cut itself feels like light. Priests have tied a pale ribbon to the chosen branch. The boy pauses, touches the trunk as if greeting an elder, and cuts cleanly. The leaves whisper and settle. The scent that rises is green and peppery, a griefless smell. The branch is borne to a long table near the Heraean, where wreaths will be woven and set aside on a tripod that shines like water. Somewhere a trumpeter practices a soft scale. Today is for names. You have washed and oiled and dusted like every morning, but your hands hesitate at your hair, as if the fingers know they will be touching leaves before night. Men congratulate one another in the careful way of people still listening. Even joy is measured, as if it might spill. The judges move with their exactness that feels like calm. They don't speak more than they must. They don't need to. They are the temperature of the day. The herald calls the victor's assembly, and the crowd gathers in rings like ripples around a thrown stone. You stand with others, runners with sand still in the cuticles of their toenails, wrestlers with fresh, dark smears on their shoulders, drivers whose knuckles have the pale imprint of reins, boys whose faces have tried and failed to be serious for hours. A priest walks along your line, touching each man's brow with a brush dipped in water and laurel, just enough to cool, not to drip. The smell sits in the nose and steadies it. When the moment opens, it opens simply. The herald lifts his staff and silence comes in the way it does here, by consent. He calls your name, your father's name, and your city. The syllables cross the warm air and enter you. You step forward and kneel on a square of clean cloth, so the sand will not scratch your shins. A judge, one of the Eleans whose eyes weighed you when you were no one, takes up a wreath from the tripod. The leaves are matte, their undersides pale as doves. He does not hurry. He sets the circle on your head, and for an instant you feel nothing. Then the weight arrives, slight and unmistakable, like a hand resting in blessing. Somewhere behind you a child cannot help it and claps once. The sound is swallowed by a wave of breath that is not quite a cheer and not quite a prayer. A boy brings a palm branch and places it in your hand. The fronds tickle your wrist. A thin wool filler, red or white, is tied gently around your arm. Sweat finds it and darkens it. A trumpeter gives a single bright note that climbs the embankment and slides back down in a softened echo. The herald says your name again, louder this time, so the grove can know it too. In that instant you're not heavier, not taller, not otherworldly. You're very much yourself, only placed precisely where your efforts always pointed, as if the world has rotated a small degree to click you into a notch you could not see until now. At the Prytaneon the sacred fire looks unchanged, though now it seems to notice you. The victors dine there, not alone but as part of the city inside the games. Meat from offerings is roasted and sliced, bread is torn in clean halves, small cakes shaped like knots are passed with a seriousness that would be funny if it weren't tender. Everyone says eat, and you do, because the body still tells the truth when the mind floats. Wine comes cut with water until it tastes like something the mouth remembers from a long time ago. A priest lifts a cup to the god who watched. A herald lifts his voice and names each victory again in an order that feels as inevitable as river to sea. After the meal, a poet begins to speak. He uses no lyre today, only the reed of his own throat, but the words lift and settle like wings. He sings of your city, not only of you. He remembers a river there, and a hill, and the name of a small temple with chipped steps where you once tied your sandal. He praises your trainer, and the ones who taught that trainer, and the line of learning behind them like a cord plaited through time. He does not lie about luck. He mentions it politely, then returns to labour. If a patron has paid him, the poet glances at the patron just once, and then leaves the glance behind. What stays is the shape of your day set to a music that strangers can carry home. You think of what you will leave here. You walk back to the palestra and sit on the ledge where you scraped oil and dust from your skin for so many mornings. In your lap lies your strigil. It has your thumb's shallow groove worn into the handle. You polish it with a fold of clean wool until it reflects your knuckles. Then you rise and take it to a small altar and set it there with 2 olives and a few grains of barley. You speak not to be heard, but to put breath on the thing you are giving away. A boy watches you with ferocious attention, as if he could learn victory from the shape of your hand setting down a tool. A sculptor finds you by the treasuries, eyes quick, hair plastered to his forehead, a smear of black clay along his wrist. He speaks in the way of men who are used to waiting for fortunes to choose them. A statue, he says, as if saying breakfast. Not today, perhaps not this Olympiad, but if your city wishes, a portrait in bronze could stand where the doves drop their shadows at noon. He names costs without naming numbers. He names the time clay takes to dry. He tells you how much of a man can be captured in metal and how much must be left for breath. You promise nothing. You imagine it briefly, a likeness of your steadiness more than your face, and then let the thought pass, because the day is already full. Scribes work in a shade that looks like honey poured thin. They copy lists, dry wax, scrape mistakes smooth, and press new letters where the old ones yielded. Your name enters their tablets, to be carried home to a record where it will sit beside names you once said aloud like spells. You feel a double life beginning, one of breath and sandals and tomorrow, and one made of strokes incised by a stylus, flatter than a shadow and much longer lived. When the sun lets go its tightness, you walk once more through the tunnel into the stadium. It is empty in a way that is not loneliness. You step to the line where your toes learn to wait. The sand holds the day's scuffs, but the wind is already at work smoothing. You bow your head, not a large bow, and then turn back toward the grove. As you pass the zanes in the archway, you read a single short inscription without moving your lips. The letters feel older than your bones. You imagine, for one fragment of a moment, your own name cut below a figure of the god not as punishment but as offering, and you feel the muscles of your back tighten at the thought. You walk on, grateful that your wreath had no coin glued to it. Evening wraps the sanctuary in a softness that belongs only to last nights in holy places. You sit with companions under a tree that knows more human secrets than any priest. Men who lost today speak in voices that are gentle to their own throats. Next time, someone says, and another answers, rest first. And in that sequence there is wisdom. A boy who was sure he was a man now plans to be a boy again a little longer. He says it without bitterness and is applauded. A driver whose hands still tremble holds them out like proof of something that has no name and is entirely worth the trouble. Oil lamps go up along the stowers like small constellations that have agreed to come down and sit with you. Morning gives you farewell in its ballast. The smell of ashes lighter, the smith's hammer slower, the river louder because you are listening for it. The truce is still a living thing, a veil over the roads, and you step under it like a man passing from shade to shade. Merchants pack their wares with the tender rudeness of people who like each other and are tired. You lift your bag, which is no heavier than when you came, though you're sure something has been added. At the edge of the Altes you turn once more. A priest straightens a wreath on a hook. The boy who cut the branch yesterday chases a dog and then pretends he wasn't. You take the sight and put it somewhere you can reach without thinking. The road home does what roads always do after great things. It makes you small again so you can fit inside your life. People you meet learn quickly to ask the right question not first, but second. Did you see the statue? How were the figs? And how did you do? You answer with a nod and a lift of the palm branch you have kept whole and green by luck and attention. The story walks beside you without tiring. At river crossings, a ferryman refuses your coin and touches the leaves on your head like a blessing he's been waiting to give all season. In a village, a woman breaks a loaf and presses the better half into your hand. In a portico at dusk, an old wrestler sets your ankle straight with a pinch and says, "There." And you had not known it needed it until then. As the hills you know begin one by one to appear, word outruns you. Boys tear along the lane, tripping on their own excitement, then run back to the city like a report with legs. Someone dresses the doorway with garlands too quickly and stands back, deciding if it looks careless or just joyful. A few in the council argue about where you should be welcomed, at the gate or at the heart. But the argument dissolves because someone sees you coming and begins to sing a line that others know without knowing they knew it. The line becomes a song. It is not about you, it is about the us to which you have returned. The gate stands open. In some cities the hinges do not squeal for a victor because the rumour says walls are for places that doubt themselves, and today your city does not. You pass beneath an arch you have walked under 100 times and feel it for the first time. People reach toward the wreath not to touch but to steady their own hands. Your mother does not move until you're quite near, and then she moves all at once and becomes every mother who waited at every gate. Your father touches the palm branch, then your hair, then his own heart, trying to find a place where this belongs. The city gives what it gives. A seat in the front row at the theatre, where shadows will look different from now on. A share in dinners at the town's hearth. A small exemption from something irritating that used to own your morning. Someone proposes a money prize. Someone else recites a law about such things. A mason etches your name where other names live. Men who wrestled before you were born. A runner who died and whose song still tastes of salt. A poet climbs a step, clears his throat and says he has nothing prepared, then proves himself a liar in the best way by reciting 4 lines that make the old women cover their mouths with their fingers and the young men stand with their feet a little wider apart. That night the gymnasium smells like oil and bread and the giddy fatigue of congratulations. Your trainer pours a little wine onto the earth and says nothing at all, which is his way of saying everything. Boys run the length of the courtyard with arms out as if they carry shields. A girl at the doorway braids a wreath from the long leaves of a houseplant and insists you wear it over the other one. Your friend who finished second watches you for a long moment and then grins, and in that grin is the unrecorded half of all victories. Days settle. The wreath dries and darkens and still holds a shape that your fingers, in passing, cannot resist. You hang the palm on a nail where it will curl with dignity. The line at the market moves aside before you reach it for a week and then forgets, as it should. You return to the track early, not to prove anything but because breath likes morning. A boy you used to lap now keeps your shoulder for half the distance, and you adjust your stride to teach without saying that you are teaching. A sculptor writes again, and you send a piece of olive and a small coin and ask for patience. A mother asks if you will look at her son start, because his heels slide. You do, and they stop sliding. If you had lost, if your name were not on the tripod list, if the wreath had gone to another head, none of this would be smaller. You would still remember the cool of the council house and the boar hide under your palm. You would still know the sound of your own feet between the first trumpet and the second chord. You would still have learned the trick of making breath wider than fear. Your city would still have opened its gate because coming home from a clean attempt is a kind of victory older than song. You might have tied a ribbon to a lintel and said to it, without witnesses, "Stay," and it would have stayed. Stories begin to use your name without you. A child at the fountain throws a stone and says he is you. A weary man at the kiln straightens his back and says your city is strong because of men like you. He is wrong about the because, but you let the sentence be. Old women folding linen agree that they knew from your gait you would do well. Travellers bring versions of the poet's ode with a line added or missing. You do not correct them. The truth is somewhere between your ribs and the ash hill at Olympia, and it does not bruise when bumped. Years will pass. The wreath will become a darker ring that sits lightly on a shelf. If a statue is cast, the pigeons will eventually love it, and you will accept this as another wreath. The judges who weighed you will age into pleasant crankiness. The boy who cut your branch will grow to a man who does not remember your face, and who will cut another branch for another head, and this will please you more than the memory of your own day. You will travel again under the truce and see other men kneel and stand, and you will find that your hands, without asking you, clap once when a name is spoken with that particular steadiness, which means the sound fits the person perfectly. And then, in a quiet room on a morning that smells of warm bread and good wood, you will lift your old strigil from where you left it and feel your thumb fall into its groove. The metal will be cool and honest. You will understand that the only things we keep are shapes, of hands, of breath, of promises, which the body learns and the body remembers. You will set the tool down and tie your sandals, 2 knots, then the extra half twist you learned from a man in Ellis, and step out into a day that asks only what all days ask. Walk steadily. Honour your oaths. If the trumpet sounds, breathe. If leaves touch your hair, bow your head just enough to feel them.